everyone. Welcome to another amazing episode of Debunking Electricity Myths brought to you by EMRC Nigeria. I am your host, Isi Atiti. Today, we're going to be having a very interesting conversation and debunking a very popular myth among citizens in Nigeria, which is that the DISCOs, which are the distribution companies, are solely responsible for poor power supply in the country. Today with me to join the conversation, I have Gabriel Mango, a senior consultant at EMRC Nigeria, and a very special guest, Rahila Thomas, the country director for EMRC Nigeria. Welcome, Gabriel. Welcome, Rahila.
Thank you for having us.
So basically, I think the reason for this myth out there is because there is a basic misunderstanding of how the electricity value chain works or the structure of the electricity value chain. So would either of you care to explain and shed light on that?
Well, I guess whether they feel that the distribution companies are the sole parties responsible for power supply is because that's the only part of the entire value chain that customers have contact with. But in the electricity value chain, there are three subsectors. So there are three actors, essentially. You have the generation actor, which we can say is like your generator at home. And you have the transmission, which is the party that actually sends the power across Nigeria from lines and transformers. And then you have the distribution company that takes in that power to supply to us, the customers, at the tail end of the value chain. Now, I know there's always this talk about, oh, my transformer is not working. And then when the transformer starts to work, customers expect to see light. So there seems to be a feeling that once I have a transformer in my community or in my area, I must have light. But it doesn't work that way. I think also customers don't understand that there is the need to always match the demand for electricity and those that are supplying it, because you cannot store electricity. Once electricity is produced, it has to be taken out. So across this value chain, I always say it's a symbiotic relationship. So they are all different, but they must all work together for us to have electricity.
Yeah, to add to what Rahila said, the availability and the reliability of supply is a function of the efficiency of the entire value chain. So like she rightly said, you have the GENCOs, you have the TC and the transmission space, and you have the DISCO. Every key member of this value chain has to be efficient to ensure that the end user is being satisfied. So, for example, the average generating capacity in Nigeria is within 4,000 to 5,000. I'm not sure we've got it to 5,000. And the demand is estimated to be above 20,000 megawatts. So you can't hold the DISCOs accountable for non-availability of energy in your area when the generation guys cannot produce those quantum of energy. Availability and the reliability of supply is a function of the entire value chain, not just that of the DISCO.
Thank you very much. So from what the both of you have said, the value chain has generators, transmission, and the distributors, and it's not just the DISCOs which the customers interface with. Now that we have identified these key players, what would you highlight or specifically identify to be the factors that contribute to poor power supply in the country across the value chain?
I think to start with, demand is much more than supply. So the demand for power is more than what we are getting. Like Gabriel said earlier, our load projection for Nigeria from the reports by the National Control Center is from 20,000 to 25,000 megawatts. And if you see that today, we're only having, let's say max 5,000 megawatts. On the average last year, we did 3,300 megawatts. If you see that gap, definitely an indication that there's poor power supply. Now, is that solely a responsibility or the fault of a distribution company? The answer is no. So a distribution company is limited by the availability of supply that comes from the national grid. However, the distribution company can also source for supply from other generators that are not necessarily on the national grid. But the demand and supply need to be closer for us as a country to see that improved supply. So that's one factor, the fact that the gap between demand and supply is so huge. The second one is around investment. You need to invest in the infrastructure that allows a transfer of power from the generator through to transmission to the distribution. So when we talk about network systems in the power market or electricity market, we're looking at the transmission network and the distribution network. And they're already weak. I mean, you're talking about lines, you're talking about transformers, you're talking about switch yards, you're talking about circuit breakers to help power flow in certain directions. You're talking about metering at different points in the distribution network to account for energy that comes through, and also the meters to the customers. So if you look at all that, if you don't invest, the network will not be strong enough to allow the power that is available to even pass through. So today we have 4.5 megawatts. Even at that, we are struggling. There's heavy load shedding. And when we say load shedding, that means when one part has power, some other part will not have. So they try to ensure that everybody have a fair share of electricity supply. So everybody's trying to say, okay, I don't have enough, but the little I have, how do I allocate it in a way that customers around my network are at least happy? But of course, as we know, a lot of customers are not happy. They feel that they are paying for darkness, but it is not solely because the distribution companies are at fault, but it's the entire value chain.
Thank you very much, Rahila. So, Gabriel, now that we've identified the factors contributing to poor power supply, can you please help us highlight the functions of the DISCOs, since they are the ones that interface with the customers, and where their responsibilities begin and end?
Okay. Like the term state distribution, the key task there is to distribute power to homes. And in doing that, there's a lot of investment requirement that we expect the DISCO guys to carry on. The DISCO sector is being privatized. So you have 60% of the equity being in private owner. So we expect massive investment there. So the key function, to go back to your question, is to ensure efficient and effective distribution of energy to every homes. And in doing that, you ought to ensure investment, to ensure energy accounting, to ensure safety of electricity to homes, and also to ensure that every customer is being satisfied at every end. And the good thing is the ability of the Commission has given the DISCOs an open hand to explore initiative in ensuring that they attain their functions through franchising in areas where you can invest. You have a third party to come on board to ensure you supply the customer. And also in terms of metering, the government has come through CBN funding and other initiatives to ensure that energy accounting is being done and adequate service delivery to every customer.
So I would say that when we talk about distribution function, the responsibility really is to provide supply to customers in a way that that supply can be accounted for. And when I get that supply, I will pay for what I get. So metering is a critical factor. So they're supposed to meter their customers. They're supposed to also provide great customer service in the sense that if customers have complaints, they should respond effectively. There should be a channel of responding to customers that have issues. Things like, if I've not had power for a week, or even in 24 hours, I don't have power, I shouldn't be on a queue of 1,000 before somebody gets to me. The DISCO is supposed to meet that, and also look for different ways they can meet my energy needs. So for a distribution company, your franchise has different class of customers. You have the commercial, you have the residential, you have industrial, you have like the government parastatals. It's a DISCO's responsibility to know how to meet the demand for each of these customers, in what way, and make them happy.
So, in conclusion, I would also like to add that although the customers feel like it is not part of their responsibility in any way to preserve electricity infrastructure or carry out certain actions that will contribute to electricity being available for everybody, actually, the customers have a lot to do as mandated by NERC guidelines. There are rules and regulations that must be followed to contribute to no loss of energy. So one of them I would like to say is energy theft. So customers that carry out energy theft or vandalization of electricity infrastructure or tampering with their meters to not read what they actually consume contribute to poor power supply. This is because when you steal energy, you then make energy unavailable for people that would be willing to pay for it, or you make your neighbor, your next door neighbor, pay more than they actually consume. So these little actions that the customers carry out also contribute to poor power supply. Rahida, would you have anything to add on that?
The first point is that if you are consuming energy, you must pay for it, and there's price for that. So the point about tampering your meters, people wonder when we say, oh, energy theft, how do you steal energy? Energy theft is if I have 10 ACs in my house and you call a former PSTN staff, they call them NEPA2 because they are not part of the system any longer, but they understand the engineering of the sector and they know where to go to tamper with it. So in your house, they'll take off all the ACs, 5 out of 10, you take it off the meter. In fact, in some cases, they take off everything because they don't want the meter to read as fast. Now, like I think ICU mentioned earlier, if you are stealing energy in that way, if there are 3-4 customers down your line that don't have meters for whatever reason, they are the ones that will be paying for that energy you've stolen. And then you hear all this issue or outcry about estimated billing. That is why there's the outcry, because you who have a meter are bypassing, you're stealing energy, but your neighbor is paying for it. And also, customers need to be policing electricity electricity supplied and how it's consumed. So if you have a friend you know clearly is bypassing power, you should be able to report it, especially if people live in the same area. And even not just report it, that there's house X, Y, and Z, you need to go and check the meters. It all adds up to supporting the utility in your franchise to provide better supply, because you don't want people stealing. You want people to pay for what they get.
So just to add to that, you don't even have to have a meter to be able to steal electricity, because I know there are people on estimated billing that do something called hanging, where they do some connections on their transformers and direct electricity to their houses. So not necessarily meter bypassing. People even on estimated billing can steal electricity. And as an electricity customer, it's your responsibility to report such people. Gabriel, do you have anything to add?
Always been of the opinion that customer who steals energy should be jailed. It's not funny. If you look at the tariff, a component of the tariff, the 80-cent losses, and the energy tariff is a driver to collection and commercial losses. That being recognized in the tariff, increase the tariff. Now, areas that have high energy tariff discourages investment. These schools that experience high energy tariff have their efficiency affected, because at this point you don't have cash flow to run a lot of things. And that being said, it kind of affects the entire value chain. So the customers are the key contributors to the function of the value chain. Because if we have a paying customer, you tend to encourage investment in the sector. If an investor is coming on board and is much aware that for every 1 naira he invests, he gets his 1 naira and a return on investment, he'll be willing to do more for every unit. But when you come to a space where you're not sure of your investment and customers are not being punished for their action, but rather the discos and other members of the value chain are being punished for their action. The debt in the sector currently is in trillions, if I'm not mistaken. Carry forward debts. If you project Nigerian debt to the current energy theft, there's a lot of loss in the sector. Nobody wants to come and invest in the sector, not because it's not viable, but because there's no guarantee of return on investment. And where does that guarantee come from? Customer payment. So if customers are not being penalized for their action, it affects the entire value chain. And that's why for me, I feel customers should be jailed for stealing. It's theft. Be it energy, whatever it is, it's theft. It should be criminalized.
Yeah, and even to add the point you're making, Gabriel, about if you steal energy, the losses in your area will be much higher. And that in itself will reduce the electricity that goes to your place, because the distribution company is trying to send power to areas that give them the highest collection. So a utility that have limited resources, or in terms of the ability to satisfy customers 100% because of generation that is supplied to them, they will send power to where they have the highest collection. If your area has better paying customers and you are policing your neighbors to ensure that nobody is stealing, then it helps supply to your area, because the distribution company's revenue will be higher. They'll be able to invest, like Gabriel has mentioned, that investments will come in, and then that improves the overall supply to you as a customer, and everybody is happy. It's a win-win. The utility has money to run its operations, access finance for more investment. The customer is happy because more power will come to them, and
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rahila. Thank you, Gabriel. So guys, I hope with today's episode you've been able to understand the fact that poor power supply in Nigeria is not solely dependent or caused by the discos, and even us as customers have responsibilities that we have to carry out to avoid this. Thank you guys. Thanks for listening.